What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Zero Lab. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the new archetypes coming out in Temporal Forces with this new set release coming out this Friday and going to be legal for the EUIC in London in just a couple of weeks. This is a very interesting deck and is exciting a lot of people because a lot of people like efficient one prize attackers, and that's what this deck is full of. So we're going to be looking at the Ancient Box deck featuring the new Koraidon, Roaring Moon, and Fluttermane from the Temporal Forces set. So we have the Future Box and the Ancient Box, and there's sort of the battle between the past and the future to see who can come out on top. And we're going to be taking a look at a couple of deck lists from Japan that have been doing well in City Leagues today. And from those deck lists, maybe you can sort of combine some of the ideas in them or take one of them as is, that same 60, and try it out for yourself and see what you like. So for the first deck list that we're going to be looking at today, it's going to be just a straight single prize Ancient Box deck. And this one is heavily focused on items. A lot of these are heavily focused on items, but the idea is that you want to get a lot of ancient cards in your discard pile so that that Roaring Moon's attack can do more damage. The Roaring Moon's first attack for Dark does 70 damage plus 10 more damage for each ancient card in your deck. So if you're trying to hit something like 330 damage on a Charizard EX, for example, you would need to get 26 ancient cards in your discard pile. But we do play plenty of ancient cards in this deck to get into the discard pile and start to reach for those higher numbers. At the same time, we are playing a one prize deck with efficient attackers that only cost 2 energy to attack with and can utilize the Professor Sada's Vitality supporter card to accelerate some of that energy in play. And so you can even trade evenly with these 2 prize decks by two-shotting them. So going over this deck list, we have a 4/4/4 line of the Moon, Fluttermane, and Koraidon. So the Roaring Moon, like I already talked about, is used for that first attack, 70 damage plus 10 more damage for each ancient card in your discard pile. The Fluttermane is primarily something that you want to start in the active position and won't often attack with. There's 4 of them in here because you want to get more ancient cards in the discard pile, and Fluttermane is actually a good card to start against certain matchups. For example, as its ability shuts off your opponent's active Pokemon's ability. So it shuts down things like Comfey's Flower Selecting if Comfey's in the active, and your opponent's Radiant Greninja if their Radiant Greninja is in the active, and that sort of thing. Otherwise, we're trying to discard our Fluttermanes to increase the damage output of that Roaring Moon's attack. And then the Koraidon's second attack does 30 damage for each ancient Pokemon in play. So if you have 6 ancient Pokemon in play, the Koraidon for a fighting and colorless energy can do 180 damage, which is pretty good damage output. Can knock out things like Lumineon V and Squawkabilly, and can two-shot larger EXs as well. And then we have a Radiant Greninja to add some draw support into this deck. For our supporters, we have the Professor Sada's Vitality, very important card for accelerating our energy. It says choose 2 of your ancient Pokemon in play, and then you can discard you can attach an energy from your discard pile to each of those ancient Pokemon, and then draw 3 cards. And then we have the new Explorer's Guidance, where you look at the top 6 cards of your deck, discard 4 of them, and put 2 of them into your hand. So Explorer's Guidance is a way to turbo through your deck, get more ancient cards into the discard pile, and start powering up that Roaring Moon's attack. Then we get into the items here: 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Earthen Vessel, 4 Pokegear, 3 Nest Ball. So great ball search to find our Pokemon. For Ultra Ball, helping us to discard more ancient cards out of our hand to power up, again, that baby Roaring Moon's attack. Earthen Vessel helps us find our energy to conceal cards away, and then every time we play an Earthen Vessel, we can discard an ancient card from hand, and the Earthen Vessel itself also gets discarded, so building up more ancient cards in that discard pile. For Pokegear, important because we need to find our Professor Sada's Vitality to keep powering up our attackers over and over, and good to find that Explorer's Guidance in the early game. Late game as well to discard more ancient cards off of its effect. 3 counter catchers. There's not a lot of gusting in this deck, and like I mentioned before, sometimes we're playing from behind against these larger HP decks because we're having to two-shot their larger attackers. Arceus V-Star, Lugia V-Star, Giratina V-Star, Charizard EX, those sorts of things. We can't immediately one-shot those early in the game, so we're going to have to be two-shotting those, and so we will be behind on the prize trade, and so counter catcher can be a very good I don't know what happened there with my computer, but can be a very good way to gust around your opponent's Pokemon. Then we do play 2 super rods and a heavy ball in case we prize like our Radiant Greninja or some of our Roaring Moons, for example. And then super rods obviously can get us back our attackers after we've used them or potentially Pokestop them away. And then 1 Pal Pad as well. Again, it's important to chain those Sada's Vitalities every turn because they're helping you power up your Pokemon. So Pal Pad to get some Sadas back is good, although it does have some anti-synergy with having more ancient cards in the discard pile. When you play Pal Pad, you're going to bring back 2 Sadas, so that's 2 less ancient cards in your discard pile, but sometimes you need to make that sacrifice to keep powering up attackers. And then the ace spec of choice for this deck is the Awakening Drum, which reads you can draw a card for every ancient card or ancient Pokemon that you have in play. So you can draw up to 6 cards off of an item card, a very strong draw power, and combined with the Pokestop in the deck, you can obviously get your Awakening Drum off of Pokestop, and that is very strong draw engine because this deck can struggle in the late game when it gets Iono'd to a low hand size. So you need to have Pokegears and that Awakening Drum left in deck to keep drawing through your deck and find those Sadas, find those Explorer's Guidance to keep getting your next attacker set up. 1 Superior Energy Retrieval. Obviously, we don't have a ton of energy in this deck. And on top of that, Superior Energy Retrieval helps us discard more ancient cards. And gets us energy back when we need it. 4 Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, very good to beef up the HP of some of your attackers. So 190 HP Roaring Moon, 200 HP Roaring Moon, 200 HP Koraidon. And at the same time, you do want to discard these. They're just more ancient cards that you can discard off of Pokestop, off of Explorer's Guidance, that sort of thing to build up that ancient count in your discard pile. For Pokestop, obviously, we're playing a pretty item-heavy deck, and we don't mind discarding Pokemon. We can discard our Fluttermanes, our extra Koraidons that we don't need to attack with right away to keep getting more ancient cards in the discard pile, and that really is the name of the game with this deck. A little bit light on the energy here, 6 Dark, 1 Fighting, so if you prize that Fighting, you can't attack with the Koraidon. And until you get a few ancient cards in the discard pile, Koraidon really is your main attacker, so I could see going up to a 2 or 3 count of fighting energy in this deck to make sure you can attack with the Koraidon. You don't need as high of a count because you do have the Earthen Vessels to tutor out those fighting energies, but playing just 1 makes me a little bit nervous about prizes. So this is a way that you could play this Ancient Box deck as a fully single prize deck. And it seems pretty strong to me. I think it can falter at times. And maybe there's a better way to play this deck, but that is for the meta to decide as we go into the EUIC and see some online tournament results over here in the West. Moving on, we'll look at another example of a more one-prize version of this deck. Some of the counts are a little bit different in here. But the theory is the same. We're playing 4/4 of the Moon and the Koraidon, cut down to 2 of the Fluttermane, but we are playing the Slitherwing and the Great Tusk. The Great Tusk has an attack that can mill the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck if you played an Ancient Supporter this turn. So you can get to the point where your opponent has not a lot of cards left in deck, and kind of out of nowhere you can use this Great Tusk and win the game by milling the last 4 cards in their deck. And it's also a way to maybe help against things like stall and that sort of thing. Maybe some of your tougher matchups you rely more on the milling strategy, but you only play 1, so it's not super effective, but it can be effective. And then the Slitherwing with the Burning Turbulence attack, it can do 120 damage, so you're hitting weakness on things like Iron Hands and Arceus V, which are very good things to hit weakness on. Other than that, the supporter counts are pretty much the same. We do have a Boss's Orders in this list along with the 3 counter catchers, and then significantly cut down on the Ultra Ball counts. I don't know if I like that because, again, you do want to be discarding ancient cards, but did opt for a Dark Patch, so it's nice to have some item ways of accelerating energy to your attackers, along with that Professor Sada's Vitality. So another interesting way to play this deck, the single prize route, and it's kind of up to the players to decide what they think is the best way to play this deck. Moving on to a third example, we get into playing some more 2-prizers. So this is another deck list that did well in the City Leagues over in Japan, really leaning into those Great Tusks. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. I don't think that there's a lot of games that you're going to win by milling. And if you want to go around that strategy, I think you probably more fully devote yourself to that milling strategy rather than trying to build it around an attacker as well. But the interesting thing about this list is it's playing the Baby Roaring Moon and the Roaring Moon EX with that frenzied gouging attack, which can KO anything essentially. And then sort of a similar supporter count, 4 Nest Ball, 3 Ultra Ball, but playing the 4 Dark Patch in this list to help you power up that Roaring Moon EX and the Roaring Moon. And you'll also notice that they chose to play Prime Catcher in this list over the Awakening Drum. So another way to play the Ancient Box deck, incorporating some of those 2 prizers in that Roaring Moon EX and incorporating more of those dark patches as well in this list. Than some of the other lists we're playing. If I were to play Ancient Box, I would probably do sort of a mix of this list and this list. I like sort of the I like incorporating the Roaring Moon EX into the deck because there are some threats that sometimes you just can't quite get enough ancient cards into the discard pile to one-shot things with the Baby Roaring Moon, and so sometimes you do need to lean into that frenzied gouging to take early knockouts on like something like a Charizard EX. And it's nice to have a little bit higher HP attackers, especially with the Ancient Booster Capsule attached. That Roaring Moon EX has 290 damage, and even if you're using the Calamity Storm attack to take knockouts or do some damage, Roaring Moon EX can be a tougher Pokemon for your opponents to knock out. So I would probably play something like this first list, maybe cutting down on some of those Fluttermanes and Koraidons and adding in more Dark Patches and the Roaring Moon EX itself. But I do think that Pokestop is probably the correct way to build around this sort of list. You really have limited draw in the late game, and so you do want to have the ability to draw into item cards like Pokegear and Awakening Drum off of your Pokestop late game when you get Iono'd, so that you can continue drawing through your deck and not be bricked out of the late game and unable to power up another attacker. So Ancient Box, a very interesting deck. It remains to be seen if it will be powerful enough to be used in this upcoming format at the EUIC. I know it's a deck that a lot of people are excited about, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it showing up in early online tournaments, and we'll have to determine from there where its position is in the meta going into EUIC. But certainly a very fun deck, a very interesting deck, and it's cool to have these tanky one prize attackers. It just remains to be seen if they can do enough damage to hang with the bigger decks. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some good ideas on how to build the Ancient Box deck. If it did, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and let us know what you're thinking of playing in the upcoming Temporal Forces format. But that is all from me for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.